My mom told me there was a family emergency. That's why they couldn't come to my wedding. 10 minutes later, my sister posted a photo holding hands with my fiancé on my wedding day. Her caption? "Some things are just meant to be." That was the moment I realized. They all knew, and they all chose her. My parents, my fiancé, my own blood. I stood there alone in a white dress reading that text. No tears, just silence. Something inside me broke that day, and I don't think it ever fully healed. I'm about to share something close to my heart. But before I do, can you say "hearing" in the comments? Or tell me where you're from? I love hearing how far my story reached. It's always good to know I'm not alone in this. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. My mom told me there was a family emergency. That's why they couldn't come to my wedding. 10 minutes later, my sister posted a photo, holding hands with my fiancé, on my wedding day. Her caption? "Some things are just meant to be." That was the moment I realized. They all knew, and they all chose her. My parents, my fiancé, my own blood. I stood there, alone in a white dress, reading that text. No tears, just silence. Something inside me broke that day, and I don't think it ever fully healed. Before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Say "listening" in the comments, or tell me where you're from. It helps more than you think. Thank you. And now, here's my story. The studio was too quiet. It was supposed to be intimate, small, filled with warmth and laughter, our kind of celebration. I had always wanted my wedding to feel personal, not like a grand ballroom affair. So I transformed my art studio in Capitol Hill into a soft, candlelit space. I placed lavender in mason jars on each table, strung fairy lights along the beams. I even baked the wedding cake myself, a simple one-tier lemon cake with a touch of lavender on top. 10 chairs were set out. Just 10. For the people who mattered. Except no one showed up. I stood in my off-white satin dress, my hands a little shaky, brushing the folds that kept slipping down from my shoulders. I kept glancing at the clock. 5 p.m. Reed had said he'd be early. Mom said she couldn't wait to see the studio transformed. I told myself traffic might be holding them up. Maybe my dad had forgotten his tie and they had to turn back. I even smiled at the thought. I walked over to the mirror. My reflection stared back, hair pinned perfectly, makeup still fresh, a hopeful bride trying not to panic. Outside, the Seattle rain tapped softly against the window panes, growing louder as minutes crawled by. I sat down on one of the benches. My dress caught on the wooden leg, tangling a bit. I didn't move. I just sat there, hugging the lavender bouquet I had picked this morning at Pike Place Market. It had started to wilt. At 5:32 p.m., my phone buzzed. A rush of relief hit me. Finally. I reached for it so fast I nearly dropped the bouquet. But when I saw the sender, Mom, something inside me paused. Then I opened it. "Sorry, honey, we can't make it. Family emergency." That was it. No details, no voice, just text. Just cold, silent words that didn't match the warmth I had imagined. I reread it 3 times. Then again. My fingers trembled. My heart didn't race. It sank. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't move. I sat there, staring at the message, waiting for it to change. Out of habit, or maybe denial, I opened Instagram. Just something to break the moment. Something normal. But that's when I saw it. Miranda had posted on her story 10 minutes ago. It was a photo. Her hand laced with reeds. They were seated at a candlelit table, wine glasses raised, a half-eaten creme brulee between them. He was smiling. So was she. And underneath that carefully filtered picture, the caption read, "Some things are just meant to be." It felt like someone had punched the air out of my lungs. They weren't just together. They were celebrating. On my wedding day. At the exact time I was sitting in that room, waiting. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad luck or poor timing. It was deliberate. I replayed the story, pausing on the video clip. I could see the clock behind them. 5 p.m. The same moment I had been adjusting my dress, wondering if Reed's tie had held them up. They were never coming. They never intended to. A memory flashed in my head. Last month, Reed had been acting strange around Miranda. Their conversations that trailed off when I entered the room. The inside jokes I wasn't part of. The time Miranda had canceled lunch with me but later posted from a cafe near Reed's office. I had chalked it up to coincidence. I didn't want to be that woman. The suspicious, insecure type. Now I was the abandoned one. I sat there for a long time. Long enough for the lights to start humming, for the lavender to look dull gray, for my heart to stop hoping someone would walk through the door. Eventually, I stood up. My knees were stiff, but I moved anyway. I walked back to the mirror, the same one I had chosen for its elegant antique frame. It reflected a woman who still wore her wedding dress, but something inside her had changed. I stared into her eyes. No tears, no rage, just the quiet beginning of something new. I picked up the bouquet, now drooping, and stood in front of the mirror. I whispered one sentence, my wedding vow, spoken not to a man, but to myself. I choose me. Then I reached for my camera, set the timer, stepped back into the center of the studio. I stood tall, alone, framed by the empty chairs, the quiet cake, the string lights that never got to sparkle for anyone else, and the shutter clicked. That photo became the first piece in my next gallery show. No title, just an image of a woman who kept her promise, even when everyone else broke theirs. Seattle has always been quiet in the way that breaks your heart a little. The kind of city that breathes slowly, full of gray skies, soft drizzle, and muted corners where people like me can disappear without anyone noticing. That's probably why I stayed. I ran a small art studio tucked behind an alley off Pike Street. Nothing flashy, just light-drenched walls, secondhand shelves lined with brushes and pigments, and canvases leaned haphazardly along the floor. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. In that space, I painted without needing anyone's approval. I breathed. Miranda, on the other hand, didn't just walk into a room. She announced herself. Even as kids, she didn't speak so much as command. Teachers adored her. Strangers turned to look. She wore ambition like perfume, strong, lingering, and impossible to ignore. And maybe I didn't mind that she took the spotlight. Maybe for a long time, it felt safer in the shade. Reed had been her friend in college. They met in some high-level economic theory class. Miranda always said he was the only guy who could keep up with her intellectually. At least, that's how she framed it. I first met him at an art fair I was exhibiting in, a rainy Sunday, when he ducked into my tent to avoid a downpour. He stayed long after the rain stopped. We talked for hours, about color, about chaos, about how his mind loved order and mine ran on instinct. He laughed like someone who hadn't in a while. That day, he bought a small oil sketch I had nearly painted over. He said it made him feel something he couldn't explain. A week later, he asked me out. I remember the first time I told my parents about Reed. My dad blinked and said, "He's Miranda's friend, right?" My mom nodded slowly. "He's very handsome, Celeste," she added, like it was a warning. "Just make sure you don't let him slip away." That was the tone of it, always. Subtle, but sharp. Like they were waiting for the moment he'd realize I was the consolation prize. Once, at a family barbecue, my aunt leaned over and whispered, "Well, Miranda's a head-turner, but you have that quiet charm. Men appreciate peace. It didn't feel like a compliment. Miranda didn't say much when she heard Reed and I were together, just raised an eyebrow and said, "Huh." Unexpected. Then she moved on. She had a boyfriend at the time, some hedge fund guy named Landon who wore loafers without socks and talked about Monaco like it was a grocery store. But 6 months before my wedding, they broke up. Messy, public, predictable. She called me crying one night. "I don't want to be alone right now. Can I come stay a few days?" Of course I said yes. She showed up with 2 suitcases and a cloud of perfume I was allergic to. Said she'd help me plan the wedding, be a buffer between me and Mom, help me pick flowers, the playlist, the cake. And at first, it felt good. Like maybe she was trying. Like maybe we were finally sisters again, not rivals dressed in family skin. But something shifted. Slowly. She started changing appointments without asking. She told the florist I was terrible with colors, told the caterer to cut the vegetarian options because Celeste eats anything. She'd laugh while saying it, like it was cute, like I was too soft to mind. I did mind. I just didn't say it. Reed didn't say anything either. When I asked if it bothered him that Miranda was getting so involved, he just smiled. "That's how she is," he said. "You know her." Then he added, "It's just her way of showing she cares." One night, I came home late from the studio. They were sitting on the couch. Close. Not touching. Not quite. But something about their posture made me pause in the hallway, keys still in hand. They didn't see me. Miranda was laughing at something on Reed's phone. Her fingers brushed his knee. He didn't move. That night, I couldn't sleep. So I did what I hate admitting. I looked through his phone. I shouldn't have. I know that. But part of me already knew I'd find something. I didn't find love notes or naked pictures. What I found were whispers. Half conversations, messages like, "We should tell her, but not now. I'm just saying, it'd be cleaner this way. She's not stupid, Miranda. She'll figure it out." They weren't explicit, but they didn't have to be. The secrecy was enough. I asked Reed the next day what he and Miranda had talked about the night I came home. He said, "Just old times. College stuff." "Why?" I lied. I said, "Just curious." Miranda, meanwhile, had started leaving books open on my kitchen counter. Titles like The Art of Letting Go and When Love Isn't Enough. Once, she said to me over breakfast, "You know, your peace, Celeste. That's your thing. You make people feel calm." I smiled, unsure if it was a compliment or a condolence. Then she added, almost casually, "But sometimes people don't want calm. Sometimes they want fire. And that's what I am. I create fire." She said it like it was prophecy, like it was fact. And for a second, I saw it in her eyes. Something gleaming, something ruthless. Later that week, I caught her wearing the necklace Reed had given me, a simple gold pendant with a lavender sprig engraved. He said it reminded him of the first day we met. She claimed she thought it was hers. "We have such similar taste," she said with a grin. I started to feel like a guest in my own life. Decisions were made without me. Conversations hushed when I walked in. My wedding day grew closer, but I felt like I was shrinking. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. They weren't hiding it. I was just too hopeful, too desperate to believe I was chosen for once. But I wasn't. I was convenient. I was safe. And Miranda? She wasn't just the shadow behind my light. She was the one holding the match. I didn't mean to go through Miranda's phone. That's the part I still can't explain. Not even to myself. Maybe I was just cleaning. Maybe I was looking for a charger. Or maybe I already knew something was off and needed confirmation. Needed the universe to stop whispering and start screaming. Her phone had no password. Typical Miranda. She believed nothing she did ever needed to be hidden. The message was old, months old, but it hit like it had just been typed. Wish I told him first. Just that. 7 words. No punctuation, no name. But I didn't need a name. I knew. My stomach dropped in that way it does when the truth is too sharp, too fast. It slices before you even realize you're bleeding. So many moments snapped into focus at once, like someone had just flicked the switch in a dark room. The way she used to light up whenever he walked in, how her eyes followed him longer than they should have, how she laughed at his dumbest jokes, even when no one else did, how she always made sure to be seated next to him at family dinners. I remembered a Thanksgiving when she wore a dress too tight, too low, and Mom had whispered to me, "You should try something more feminine next time. Miranda knows how to dress for attention." I thought it was just another jab. I didn't realize the audience was already chosen. And Reed, he never shut it down, never pulled back. I thought he was just being polite. I thought that's what people do when they're trying to avoid drama. Now I knew he wasn't avoiding anything. He was balancing it, playing both ends while I stood in the middle, blind. No one ever told me. Not my mother, not my father, not even Reed himself. They let me walk into this relationship like a guest stepping into a house already lived in. And Miranda? She was the one with the key. I thought about confronting her. I even started writing a letter to Mom. I wanted to pour it all out, how betrayed I felt, how cruel it was to be treated like the second choice in my own life. But halfway through the letter, I stopped, stared at the page, then ripped it apart. Because I knew how that story would end. I could hear her voice already, soft but scolding. "Miranda's always been a little fragile, honey. You're stronger. You can handle this." They always said that I was the strong one, the silent one, the one who never caused trouble. While Miranda was the storm they tiptoed around, I was the dock expected to stay steady. They didn't love me less. They just assumed I'd always survive. A week before the wedding, Reed vanished. No calls, no texts. Just gone. I left voicemails trying not to sound desperate. Told myself maybe his phone died. Maybe he was just having a bachelor freakout. Maybe anything but what it probably was. Then Miranda posted a photo, a beach view, ocean horizon, captioned, "Sometimes healing means letting go of what was never yours." The comments poured in, heart emojis, encouragement, vague sympathy. I didn't comment. I just stared. For a long time. Not even angry anymore. Just hollow. That same night, Mom texted me, not to ask how I was doing, not to say she was proud of me or that she loved me. She wrote, "Sweetheart, let's postpone the wedding. Miranda's going through something really painful right now." That was the moment I realized. In my family, pain wasn't measured by truth. It was measured by volume. Miranda cried louder, so she got more comfort. I grieved silently, so they assumed I was fine. I was not fine. They didn't ask what I needed. They didn't care that my fiancé had disappeared, that my sister had somehow turned into the gravitational center of my life's collapse. They just expected me to endure it with grace, like I always did. But something changed that night. I closed my phone, stood in front of my bathroom mirror, and looked at myself. Not the sad girl, not the left-behind bride, but a woman in freefall who had just realized she had wings. I picked up a pen and wrote new vows, not on fancy stationery, just on a blank sketchbook page. Not for Reed, not for an audience, for me. I vow to never again choose silence over truth. I vow to never again stand in a room where I'm unwelcome just to make others comfortable. I vow to honor what I feel, even when it's inconvenient. I vow to choose me, even when no one else does. They weren't pretty. They weren't poetic. But they were honest. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. A week passed and Reed never called. Not a text. Not a voicemail. Silence sat in the corners of my apartment like a guest that overstayed its welcome. I kept checking my phone, hoping it had glitched. That maybe I missed a call. That maybe there'd be a message saying he got stuck somewhere, was sorry, loved me. But there was nothing. Just a void, echoing louder with each passing day. And still, I kept moving. Every morning, I walked into my studio like it was just any other day. I rearranged the folding chairs I'd borrowed from the community center, lined them up evenly along the side walls. I retied the lavender bundles with satin ribbon, even though the edges were already beginning to brown. I took the ivory gown down from the garment rack, unzipped it gently, like it was made of paper and would crumble if I moved too fast. I tried it on again and again, not because I needed to adjust anything, but because I needed to remind myself I was still here, still me, still standing. My mother sent a text midweek. "You really should cancel, honey. This isn't healthy." That was it. No question mark. No concern. Just a polite suggestion disguised as care. My father didn't say a word, not even a forwarded message. He'd always been better at absence than presence. Friends I'd known since college started fading out. One messaged, "Hey, I love you, but this whole situation is super awkward with Miranda. I think I'll sit this one out." Another didn't reply at all. It became clear. My sister hadn't just taken my fiancé, she'd taken the crowd too. She had always been the sun in our solar system. I had merely been a satellite. But I refused to vanish. So, when the day came, I dressed. I pulled the gown over my shoulders, zipped the back myself with trembling hands. I pinned my hair up the way I'd practiced for weeks. I fastened the bracelet my grandmother once gave me, the one with tiny pearls and a silver clasp shaped like a crescent moon. I stood in the studio, the echo of my heels bouncing off the bare walls. Outside, Seattle was gray and wet, as always. The sky wept where I would not. I stood in front of the full-length mirror. My reflection stared back, pale, composed, empty in all the places joy should have been. I read my vows out loud, voice steady. Not to Reed, not to anyone else, to me. I vow to rise, even when I am buried. I vow to listen to the quiet voice inside that never wanted to beg to be seen. I vow to never again put myself last in the name of keeping peace. I vow to be whole, even when I've been halved. I didn't cry, not a single tear. There was a knock on the studio door. For a moment, my heart jolted. Maybe someone changed their mind. Maybe someone showed up. Maybe I wasn't completely alone. I opened the door. It was the delivery guy, holding a bouquet of lavender. He smiled. "Celeste Langford?" "Yes," I answered too quietly. He handed it over. I recognized the handwriting on the tag. My own. I had placed the order weeks ago. A safety net of beauty for a day that was supposed to be filled with it. I signed, thanked him, and closed the door slowly. That was when I knew. No one was coming. Not a single soul. No family. No friends. Not even someone who wandered in by mistake. Miranda hadn't just stolen my wedding. She had erased my audience too. Later that evening, an email arrived from Reed. It was short, rushed, apologetic in a detached, almost corporate way. "I'm sorry for how everything unfolded. I hope you find peace and happiness. I wish you the best." Attached was a scanned letter, supposedly his, but I noticed something strange, the phrasing, certain words. Unfolded. Wellness. Personal growth. That wasn't Reed's voice. He barely spelled checks. These were Miranda's words, her cadence, her sanitized way of justifying betrayal. I searched through my old text threads with her and found nearly identical phrases in a draft message she once asked me to proofread. "Hey sis, do these sound supportive?" she had asked when she was trying to write a breakup message to someone else. I froze. Miranda didn't just take Reed, she scripted the exit. She planned the implosion and controlled the fallout. Hours later, as if to crown the day with one last insult, Miranda posted a reel on Instagram. A wedding video, hers and Reed's. It wasn't official, more like a preview. They were laughing under string lights in a garden I recognized as our cousin's property. Her dress caught my breath. It was my dress. Same design, different color. Her caption read, "Same cut, new chapter. Love always finds its way." That was the moment something inside me broke, but not in the way she intended. Not in weakness, not in despair. Something snapped free, like a chain that had rusted just long enough to finally fall away. I shut my laptop. I turned off my phone. I looked around the studio and saw something else now. Not emptiness, but potential. Tomorrow, I would turn this space into something new. Not for a wedding, not for a family, for art, for healing, for me. 3 days after the wedding that never was, I sat at my desk with a stack of handmade postcards and a pen that had run out of ink twice before noon. The air inside the studio had shifted. It no longer clung to grief like a damp coat. It had begun to breathe again. I opened the window a crack, letting the Seattle air wash in, lavender and drizzle and the faint scent of paint from the canvases drying in the back corner. Then I started writing. These weren't thank you notes for those who had attended. No one had. They were thank you notes for the absence, for the silence that had revealed so much more than words ever could. Each card was hand-pressed with dried petals from the lavender bouquet I never got to toss. I wanted them to feel something when they opened the envelope. Not rage, not guilt, just recognition. To my mother, I wrote, "Thank you for teaching me that even darkness shows you the light you learn to carry yourself." I pressed a small piece of gold foil inside, a nod to the bracelet she once gave me and never asked about again. To my father, whose silence during everything had been deafening, I simply printed an empty box. No words, just the outline. A mirror of the voicemail inbox I had waited on for weeks. To my former friends, the ones who didn't want to get caught in the middle, I wrote variations of the same thing. Your neutrality was noted. Thank you for showing me what side silence chooses. To my colleagues who had RSVP'd and then vanished, the quiet made room for my voice. I hope you hear it now. I didn't send one to Miranda. She didn't deserve one. But the universe, or maybe karma, had its own way of delivering what was due. A few days later, a mutual acquaintance posted a photo to their story, Miranda in a cream-colored gown. It wasn't just similar to mine, it was mine. The cut, the neckline, even the subtle stitched detail along the sleeves. I had posted it 2 months before on my story during a fitting, beaming in the mirror. Apparently, she had seen it and copied it down to the seam. The caption read, "Didn't she say this was her design? Huh." That's when things started to unravel. Not for me, but for her. Someone tagged a popular Reddit thread known for dissecting wedding disasters. Within hours, the image was reposted, analyzed, commented on. Bride steals sister's fiancé and her dress? Red flag in white lace. No names were mentioned, but those who knew, knew. The next day, my inbox exploded. People messaged the studio account, pretending to inquire about custom art, but really, they wanted to know, "Are you that woman?" Is it true? Did he really leave you at the altar for her? Are the vows from your website real? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence that had once broken me was now working in my favor. Then came an anonymous email from a PR representative at the beauty company where Miranda worked. It read simply, "We no longer stand behind her narrative." No name, no formal greeting, just that one line, and a screenshot of a drafted press release, canceled, but revealing enough. They'd been preparing for backlash, preparing to let her go. By the end of the week, a viral podcast that featured bridal horror stories titled one of their episodes, "The Other Bridezilla, a Story in Lace and Lies." They didn't say her name, but their intro began with, "What if the bride wasn't the one getting married and still wore the dress?" I didn't record any rebuttal. I didn't post or tweet or defend. I just kept painting. The studio began to shift in meaning again. I painted a new series called The Ceremony of One, portraits of women standing alone, draped in fabric, facing away from the viewer, lavender tucked behind their ears. No faces, just presence. Clients started asking for commissions with similar themes. Women wrote to say they saw themselves in my silence, in my stillness, in my refusal to clap back. And Miranda? She flailed in the storm she had summoned herself. My only statement was a quote I carved into a wooden panel and hung near the studio door. "Some people burn bridges, others build from the ash." I had chosen the latter. I never needed to scream. My silence was already louder than their noise ever could be. The invitation came on thick cardstock with edges trimmed in gold. A gallery in Capitol Hill wanted to feature my work in a solo exhibition titled "Things Left Behind." I stood in my studio holding the invitation in my ink-stained fingers, and for a moment, I forgot the chaos. I forgot the wedding that never was, the sister who took my place, and the silence that followed. All I could think was, something is beginning again. The preparation for the exhibit became my lifeline. I chose to display the ivory wedding dress I never wore, suspending it from a thin wire in the center of the room. I placed it beside a shelf filled with relics from my childhood, old sketchbooks, a cracked snow globe I got for my 8th birthday, and a yellowed letter from 2nd grade that simply read, "Mom, do you see me?" It wasn't subtle. I wasn't trying to be. Every object told a story of being forgotten, overlooked, or dismissed. Each piece a truth I could finally say without needing to raise my voice. When the Seattle Times published a feature about the exhibit, the subtitle read, "The Wedding That Never Happened, But Changed Everything." The photo of me standing beside the dress went viral faster than I expected. Comments flooded my gallery's page. Some were supportive, others skeptical, but the overwhelming tone was empathy. Then she came. My mother. She walked into the gallery unannounced. No warning, no call. Just her small frame cloaked in silence. She drifted through the space like she was lost in a museum of someone else's life. When she reached the dress, she didn't say a word. Her eyes lingered, then welled slightly. Then she turned and left. No goodbye, no closure. Just a door clicking shut behind her. And Miranda? Predictably, she posted a passive-aggressive quote on Instagram. "Art is for attention seekers who can't move on." That was all it took. The internet caught fire. Old college stories about Miranda resurfaced. One woman tweeted that Miranda had stolen her boyfriend freshman year by pretending to be emotionally unstable. Another posted screenshots of texts that proved Miranda once lied about me to sabotage a relationship I had in my 20s. Suddenly, the public stopped seeing her as misunderstood and started seeing her as manipulative. And for the first time in my life, someone in my family spoke up. My father. He called me, just once, to say, "Konja lamjung." I stood in my kitchen, clutching the phone, stunned by the simplicity and weight of those 4 words. It wasn't an apology, but it was something. Then came another surprise, a message from Rachel Kim, Miranda's former best friend. "I was wrong to stay silent," she wrote. "You didn't deserve what happened." The final blow came when Miranda's cosmetics brand released a brief PR statement. "Due to recent events and concerns over public trust, we have parted ways with Miranda Blake, effective immediately." She was out. No press conference, no redemption arc, just quietly removed, like a stain from silk. I didn't think she'd break that quickly, but manipulation has a short shelf life in the age of receipts. Miranda tried to pivot. Of course she did. She hired a PR agency and appeared on a podcast, painting herself as a woman caught in the crossfire of fate. She called Reed her great love and accused me of being cold, detached, too absorbed in my art to notice him slipping away. "He was drowning," she said, her voice syrupy, "and I was the only one who reached out a hand." The internet didn't buy it. The clip went viral for the wrong reasons. People dissected her tone, her phrasing, her crocodile tears. A creator on TikTok posted a stitched reaction titled, "This woman stole her sister's fiancé and thinks she's the victim," and it hit 3 million views in a day. Suddenly, Miranda wasn't the muse of sympathy anymore. She was a walking cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Reed's life unraveled in quieter ways. His startup funding got suspended, his professional reputation took a hit, and somewhere in that chaos, he remembered me. He messaged, "Can we talk? I want to explain." But I already had all the explanations I needed. What I didn't expect was the email from a women's leadership conference, forwarded to me anonymously. "We regret to inform Miranda Blake that due to concerns regarding public integrity, her invitation has been rescinded." I couldn't help but smile. This wasn't revenge. It was reality catching up. But it wasn't over. One night, I revisited old voicemails trying to delete memories like cleaning out a dusty attic, and I found one from Reed, dated months before we broke up. "Hey, just wanted to check in on Miranda. She seems off lately. I think I'm the only one she's really talking to." My throat tightened. That wasn't a man who was drifting away. That was a man already gone. And my mother? She'd gone quiet. No likes, no comments on Miranda's posts, no forwarded jokes. Then a letter arrived in my mailbox, sealed in the stationery she only used for holidays. The handwriting was stiff, as if each word cost her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she wrote. "I just want to know if you'd be willing to talk." I didn't know how to answer. Maybe I still don't. Then Reed sent one last message, just a line. "I'm sorry. I should have never let her speak for me." It landed like a pebble in a pond, rippling out long after it settled. But I didn't reply. Some truths don't need closure. Some people don't deserve a seat in your recovery. Let them watch from the distance, where they chose to stand in the first place. Reed showed up at the studio just after closing hours, his silhouette framed in the doorway like a ghost who hadn't yet decided if he deserved the right to haunt me. He looked thinner, like someone who hadn't been sleeping, though part of me suspected it was just the weight of finally standing in front of the truth. I could have ignored him. I could have locked the door and gone back to arranging the new shipment of canvas boards I hadn't even wanted to unpack. But I didn't. I let him in. We didn't sit. He stood near the front desk, clutching a bouquet of wilted lavender like he wasn't sure if it was an apology or a plea. I stayed by the table where my exhibition materials were still scattered. It was strange how familiar he felt, and yet how far removed, like watching someone else's memory in slow motion. "I didn't know what she was doing," he said first. "I thought I had control of the situation. I didn't realize until too late how much she'd twisted it." His voice cracked in places he used to hide behind confidence. He told me Miranda spun narratives, made him question what I felt, what I wanted, that she made herself indispensable, again. But I never stopped feeling something for you, he added quietly. I didn't know how to fight her without losing everything. I didn't interrupt. I let the silence hang, long enough to let him feel its weight. Then I walked over to my desk drawer and pulled out a framed photo from the exhibition. It was the shot of my wedding dress, still pristine, hung inside the shadowed corner of the gallery, surrounded by artifacts of the life I'd been forced to leave behind piece by piece. I placed it on the table in front of him. He looked at it, then at me, eyes searching for softness. I offered none. You didn't lose me, I said, voice firm but calm. You just proved you never deserved me. I opened the door and held it, waiting. He didn't say another word, just walked out like a man who'd realized too late that he'd stepped off solid ground. That night, I sat in the studio alone. I took out the vow I had once written, the one meant to be read in front of family, friends, and a man I thought would protect my heart. I rewrote it quietly, each line for me alone. When I finished, I folded it carefully, slipped it into the carved wooden box I kept hidden behind the bookshelf, and locked it. It was no longer a symbol of abandonment, but a declaration of strength. A month passed. The buzz surrounding the exhibition had calmed, but the ripple effect remained. One morning, a letter arrived. Not typed, not emailed, but written in my father's shaky hand. He wrote about Miranda's manipulations, how he had seen it growing up but dismissed it as sibling rivalry. I thought if I stayed out of it, he wrote, you two would learn to stand on your own. I see now I was just a coward. I didn't write back. But I did send an invitation to the launch of my new product line, a set of curated art kits from the studio. It was a small event, intimate, local. He came, quietly, sitting in the back row without making a scene. But when I stepped on stage to speak, he was the first to clap, the loudest too. A week later, my mother came to the studio. She wasn't dressed for a visit, and she wasn't carrying guilt. Instead, she held a bundle of dried lavender and a soft blue dress. I figured, this time I wouldn't be late, she said. I didn't ask what the dress was for. I just brought her a chair and poured us both a cup of chamomile tea. Then came Miranda. No fanfare, no dramatics. Just her, standing at the edge of the doorway, clutching a small box like a child sent to apologize for something she hadn't yet named. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, but if there's any version of life where I can be even a background character in yours, I'll take it. I didn't answer right away. I watched her as if from behind glass, remembering everything, but no longer feeling paralyzed by it. If you want to stay in my life, I said eventually, you'll need to learn what it means not to be the center of it. She nodded, eyes glassy. I handed her a flyer for a community outreach program we supported through the studio, a healing workshop for people unlearning toxic narratives. Start there. Weeks later, one of the coordinators called to tell me Miranda had not only attended the sessions, but had cried during one. Cried because for the first time, she admitted she envied me, not for attention, but for peace. I clipped the article they wrote about my exhibition, now included in a published collection titled Voices of Quiet Power, and mailed a copy to my parents. No note, just one highlighted sentence in the margin. Later that evening, I texted my mother, I forgive you, but I don't forget. Spring in Seattle always smelled like potential, wet earth, jasmine, and something unnamed just beneath the breeze. I was invited to speak at a local art therapy retreat, and I went, not to perform, but to listen. That's where I saw Marcus again. He wasn't flashy or overly articulate. He was quiet, steady. A landscape architect who once drove my mother to an art class during her recovery. He remembered me, not just from the workshop, but from the way I had once waited outside that clinic, sketchbook in hand, pretending not to be afraid. "You look like someone holding her whole world together with a pencil," he said. He didn't court me with compliments. Instead, he brought me herbal teas, adjusted the clay wheel when my wrist ached, and asked about the names I gave my paintings. I told him everything eventually. About the wedding that wasn't. About Reed, Miranda, the silence, and the rage. He never interrupted. Just listened like my story deserved space. "Forgiveness is overrated," he said one day. "You don't owe it to anyone. What you do owe yourself is room. Room for things that don't hurt." We started slowly. Weekend markets, long walks, shared playlists and no shared photos. We didn't define it. We just showed up, over and over with softness. On a rainy Tuesday, he gave me a folded page from a notebook. It wasn't music, though the lines mimicked a score. It was his writing, scattered and uncertain. "If you ever thought you weren't enough, know that to someone, you are the most beautiful thing ever found." He'd lost someone once too, his wife to cancer. He thought he'd never love again, but here we were, not filling gaps, not fixing broken things, just planting something new. I launched a new workshop, Rebuilding Memory, helping others turn past pain into present expression. Miranda signed up anonymously. I saw her in the back row, taking notes like her life depended on it. I returned home that night, unlocked the wooden box, unfolded the vows one last time. At the bottom, I wrote a single line. "I choose myself, and the one who chooses me, not because he has to, but because he sees all of me, even the parts once buried." That's all I have for now. Thank you for walking with me through all the broken pieces and quiet victories. If you've ever stood in front of a closed door, unsure if you should knock or walk away, if you've ever stayed silent just to keep the peace, or finally raised your voice to protect it, if you've ever learned to forgive, not to forget, but to free yourself, then this story is yours too. And even if you haven't lived it firsthand, but you felt something in it, some ache, some hope, some truth, just comment "I see you" below. Because sometimes the simple act of saying "I understand" is the beginning of healing, for all of us. Feel free to share your story, or sit quietly and listen. Both are welcome here. We don't need perfect endings, just honest ones. Until next time, take care of your heart. You're not alone in this. Not ever.